Christmas Every Day by William Dean Howells. The little girl came into her papa's study, as she always did Saturday morning before breakfast, and asked for a story. He tried to beg off that morning, for he was very busy, but she would not let him. So he began. Well, once there was a little pooh. She put her hand over his mouth and stopped him at the word. She said she had heard little pig stories till she was perfectly sick of them. Well, what kind of story shall I tell then? About Christmas. It's getting to be the season. It's past Thanksgiving already. It seems to me, her papa argued, that I have told us something about Christmas as about little pigs. No difference. Christmas is more interesting. Well, her papa roused himself from his writing by a great effort. Well, then I'll tell you about the little girl that wants Christmas every day in the year. How will you like that? First rate, said the little girl, and she nestled into a comfortable shape in his lap, ready for listening the story. Very well, then the little pig. Oh, what are you pounding me for? Because you say little pig instead of little girl. I should like to know what's the difference between a little pig and a little girl that want Christmas every day. Papa, said the little girl warningly, if you don't go on, I'll give it to you. And her papa thereof lighting and began to tell a story as fat as he could. Well, once there was a little girl who liked Christmas so much that she wanted it to be Christmas every day in the year. And as soon as Thanksgiving was over, she began to send postal cards to the old Christmas fairy to ask if she mightn't have it. But the old fairy never answered any of the postals. And after a while, the little girl found out that the fairy was pretty particular and wouldn't notice anything but letters. Not even correspondence cards in envelopes, but real letters on sheets of paper and sealed outside with a monogram, or your initial anyway. So then she began to send her letters, and in about 3 weeks or just the day before Christmas, it was she got a letter from the fairy, saying she might have it Christmas every day for a year, and they will see about having it longer. The little girl was a good deal excited already, preparing for the old-fashioned once a year Christmas that was coming the next day. And Fairfax the fairy's promise didn't make such an impression on her as it would have made at some other time. She just resolved to keep it to herself and surprise everybody with it as keep coming true, and then it slipped out of her mind altogether. She had a splendid Christmas. She went to bed early so as to let Santa Claus have a chance at the stockings, and in the morning she was up the first of anybody and went and filled them, and found hers all lumpy with packages of candy, and orange and grapes, and pocket books and rubber balls, and all kinds of small presents, and her big brothers with nothing but the tongues in them, and her young lady sister with a new silk umbrella, and her papas and mamas with potatoes and pieces of coal wrapped in tissue paper, just as they always had every Christmas. Then she waited around till the rest of the family were up, and she was the first to burst into the library. When the doors were open, I looked at the large present laid out on the library table, books and portfolios and boxes of stationery and breastpins and dolls and little stuffs and dozens of handkerchiefs and inkstands and skates and snow shovels and photograph frames and little easels and box of watercolors and Turkish paste and nougat and candy cherries and doll's house and waterproofs and the big Christmas tree, lighted and standing in a vast basket in the middle. She had a splendid Christmas day. She ate so much candy that she did not want any breakfast, and the whole forenoon the presents kept pouring in that express man had not had time to deliver the night before. And she went around giving the presents she had got for other people, and came home and ate turkey and cranberry for dinner, and plum pudding and nuts and raisin orange and more candy, and then went out and coasted and came in it with stomachache, crying. And her papa said he would see if his house was turned into a sort of fool's paradise another year. And they had a light supper, and pretty early everybody went to bed cross. Here the little girl pounded her papa in the back again. Well, what now? Did I say pigs? You made them act like pigs. Well, didn't they? No matter, you ought to put into a story. Very well, then we'll take it all out. Her father went on. The little girl slept very heavily, and she slept very late. But she was wakened at last by the other children dancing around her bed, with her stockings full of presents in their hands. What it is, said the little girl, and she rubbed her eyes and tried to rise up in the bed. Christmas, Christmas, Christmas! They all shouted and waving their stockings. No sense, it was Christmas yesterday. Her brothers and sisters just laughed. We don't know about Daddy. It's Christmas today anyway. You come into the library and see. Then all at once it flashed on the little girl that the fairy was keeping her promise, and her year of Christmas was beginning. She was dreadfully sleepy, but she sprang up like a lark that had overeaten itself and gone to bed cross, and darted into the library. There it was again, books and portfolios and boxes of stationery and bread spins. You needn't go over it, little Papa. I guess I can remember just what was there, said the little girl. Well, and there was the Christmas tree blazing away, and the family picking out their presents but looking pretty sleepy, and their father perfectly puzzled and her mother ready to cry. I'm sure I don't see how I am to dispose of all these things, her mother, and her father staying seeming to him had something just like the day before, but he supposed he must have dreamed it. This struck the little girl as the best kind of joke, and so she ate so much candy she didn't want any breakfast, and went around carrying presents and had turkey and cranberry for dinner, and then went up down coast and came in with a Papa. Well, what now? What did you promise, you forgetful thing? Oh yes. Well, the next day it was just the same thing over again. But everybody getting closer, and at the end of a week, times so many people had lost their tempers that you could pick up lost tempers anywhere. They perfectly dropped in the ground. Even when people tried to recover their tempers, they usually got somebody else, and it made the most dreadful mix. The little girl began to get frightened, keeping their secret all to herself. She wanted to help her mother, but she didn't dare to, and she was ashamed to ask the fairy to take back her gift. It seemed to be ungrateful and ill-bred, and she thought she would try to stand it, but the Charlie knew how she could for a whole year, so it went on, and it was Christmas on St. Valentine's Day, and Washington's birthday, just the same as any day, and it didn't skip even on 1st of April. Thought everything was comfortable that day, and that was some little relief. After a while, coal and potatoes began to be awfully scarce. So many had been wrapped up in tissue paper to fold papas and mamas with. Turkeys go to be about $1,000 a piece. Papa! Well, what? We're beginning to FAIB. Well, 2,000 then. And they go passing off almost anything for turkeys, half-grown hummingbirds, and even rocks up the Arabian Nights. The real turkeys were so scarce, and cranberries. Well, they asked a diamond apiece for cranberries. All the woods and orchards were cut down for Christmas tree, and where the woods and orchards used to be, It looks just like a stubble filled with stumps. After a while, they had to make Christmas trees out of rags and stuff them with bran, like old fashioned dolls. But there were plenty of rags because people got so poor buying presents for another that they couldn't get any new clothes, and they just wore their old ones to tatters. They got so poor that everybody had to go to the poorhouse, except the confectionaries and the fancy storekeepers, and the picture box sellers and the expressmen. And they all got so rich and proud that they would hardly wait upon person when he came to buy. It was perfectly shameful. Well, after it had gone on about 3 or 4 months, the little girl, whenever she came into the room in the morning and saw those great ugly lumpy stonks dangling at the fireplace, and then the disgusting present about everywhere, used to just sit down and burst out crying. In 6 months, she was perfectly exhausted. She couldn't even cry anymore. She just lay on the lounge and rolled her eyes and panted. At the beginning of October, she took to sitting down on dolls wherever she found them. French dolls or any kind. She hated the sight of them so. And by Thanksgiving was crazy and just slamming her presents across the room. At that time, the people didn't carry presents around nicely anymore. They flung them off the fence or through the window or anything, and instead of running their tongues out and taking Grand's pants to ride. For dear Papa or Mama or brother or sister or Susie or Sammy or Billy or Bobby or Jimmy or Jenny or whatever it was, and traveling to get the spelling right and then signing their names. And Christmas 18, they used to write in the gift box. Take you hurry old thing and then go and back it against the front door. Nearly everybody had built barns to hold their presents, but pretty soon the barns overflowed, and then they used to let them lie out in the rain or anywhere. Sometimes the police used to come and tell them to shovel their presents off the sidewalk or they would arrest them. I thought you said everybody had gone to poorhouse, interrupted the little girl. They did go at first, said her papa, but after a while the poor houses got so full that they had to send the people back to their own houses. They tried to cry when they got back, but they couldn't make the last sound. Why couldn't they? Because they had lost their voices, saying Merry Christmas so much. Did I tell you how it was on the 4th of July? No, how was it? And the little girl nestled closer in expectation of some uncommon. Well, the night before, the boys stayed up to celebrate as they always do and fell asleep before 12 o'clock as usual, expecting to be wakened by the bells and cannon. But it was nearly 8 o'clock before the first boy in the United States woke up, and then he found out what the trouble was. As soon as he could get his clothes on, he ran out of sight and smashed a big cannon torpedo down off the pavement. But it didn't make any more noise, and that a map was of paper. And after he tried about 20 or 30 more, he began to pick them up and look at them. Every single torpedo was being racing. Then he just straight it up upstairs and examined his firecrackers and toy pistol and $2 collection of fireworks, and found that they were nothing but sugar and candy painted up to look like fireworks. Before 10 o'clock, everybody in the United States found out that these 4th of July things had turned into Christmas things, and they just sat down and cried. They were so mad. There are about 20 million boys in turn into purple sugar jet, and they say they will fire off one cannon anyway. But the cannon burst into 1,000 pieces, for it was nothing but rock candy, and some of the men nearly got killed. The 4th of July orations all turned Christmas carols, and when anybody tried to read the declaration instead of saying when in the course of human events it becomes necessary, he was sure to sing, God rest you merry gentlemen. It was perfectly awful. The little girl drew a deep sigh of satisfaction. And how was it Thanksgiving? Her papa has, well, I almost afraid to tell you. I am afraid you'll think it's weak. Well, tell anyway, said the little girl. Well, before it came Thanksgiving, he had leaked out that caused all the Christmases. The little girl had suffered so much that she had talked about in her sleep. And after that, hardly anybody would play with her. People just perfectly despised her because if it had not been for her credence, it would have happened. And now, when it came Thanksgiving and she wanted them to go to church and have a squash pie and turkey and show their gratitude, they said that all the turkeys had been eaten up for her old Christmas dinner, and if she would stop at the Christmases, they would see about the gratitude. Wasn't it dreadful? And the very next day, the little girl began to sell letters to the Christmas fairy and the telegrams to stop it. But it didn't do any good, and then she got calling at the fairy's house. But the girl that came to the door always said, not a home or engagement or a dinner, or something like that. And so it went on till it came to the old ones on your Christmas Eve. The little girl fell asleep, and when she woke up in the morning, she found it was all nothing but a dream, suggested the little girl. No, indeed, said her papa, it was all every bit true. Well, what did she find out then? Why, that it wasn't Christmas at last, and wasn't ever going to be any more. Now it's time for breakfast. The little girl heard her papa fuss around the neck. You shan't go if you're going to leave it so. How do you want it left? Christmas once a year. All right, said her papa, and he went on again. Well, there was the greatest rejoicing all over the country, and it extended clear up and in Canada. The people met together everywhere and kissed and cried for joy. The city carts went around and gathered up all the candy and raisins and nuts and dumped them into the river, and it made the fish perfectly sick, and the whole United States as far out as Alaska was on blaze of bonfires where the children were burning up their gift box and presents of all kinds. They had the greatest time. The little girl went to thank Old Fairy because she had stopped it being Christmas, and she said she hoped she would keep her promise and see that Christmas never came again. Then the fairy frowned and asked her if she was sure she knew that she meant, and the little girl asked her, why not? And the old fairy said that now she was behaving just as freely as ever, and she'd better look out. This made the little girl think it all over carefully again, and she said she would be willing to have it Christmas about once in 1,000 years, and then she said 100, and she said 10, and then she let it go down to 1. Then the fairy said that was the good old way that had pleased people ever since Christmas began, and she was agreed. Then the little girl said, what are your shoes made of? And the fairy says, leather. And the little girl said, Bergen's done forever, and skip off and hippity hopped the whole way home. She was so glad. How would that do? Asked the papa. First rate, said the little girl, but she hated to have the story stop, and was very sober. However, her mama put her head in a door and asked her papa, are you never coming to breakfast? What have you been telling that child? Oh, just a moral tale. The little girl caught him around the neck again. We know, don't you tell what, papa? Don't you tell what? End.